Welcome to our channel. Before we get started, please consider liking and subscribing so we can bring more stories like this to you.
The Plumtree Patrol. Agnes Plumtree attacked the recalcitrant maple leaf with the ferocity of a seasoned warrior that clung stubbornly to her meticulously manicured lawn. A single, defiant speck marring the emerald perfection, she plucked it, the snap of the stem echoing in the morning quiet, and deposited it in her pristine green waste receptacle, the lid clicking shut with a satisfying finality. Her own property was a bulwark against the encroaching chaos of the outside world, a shining example of adherence to the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association guidelines. Her daily patrol began promptly at 7:00 a.m. Armed with a clipboard and a critical eye, Agnes surveyed the surrounding properties. The Millers at number 14 hadn't edged their walkway in at least a week, a clear violation of Bylaw 3.2, subsection B. The Johnsons' basketball hoop remained inexplicably in the driveway, despite Harold Finch, the HOA president, promising swift action. Agnes made a note on her clipboard, the lead pressing firmly against the paper. Harold was good for promises, less so for delivering on them across the street. Mrs. Gable's rose bushes were, as usual, an unkempt riot of color. Agnes appreciated a vibrant bloom as much as the next person. But there were standards, and Mrs. Gable consistently flaunted them, letting her roses climb willy-nilly over the decorative fence, a clear infraction of Section 4.1 regarding permissible plant heights. Agnes made another notation. This was becoming a veritable catalogue of offenses. The most glaring infraction, however, emanated from number 22, the former residence of the dearly departed Mr. Abernathy. The new owners, some younger couple with a proclivity for loud music and questionable landscaping choices, had erected a shed in their backyard. A large, obviously unapproved shed. Agnes squinted. She could hear the faint hum of machinery emanating from within its corrugated metal walls. Unlicensed machinery. She shivered. The thought of unauthorized construction and potential noise pollution sent a ripple of unease through her. This demanded immediate attention. The monthly HOA meeting was held, as always, in the Willow Creek Community Center, a sterile, beige room smelling faintly of stale coffee and unfulfilled potential. Agnes arrived precisely 5 minutes early. Her meticulously organized notes clutched in her hand. Harold Finch, looking harried as usual, greeted her with a weak smile. "Agnes, glad you could make it. Big turnout tonight, it seems." He gestured vaguely at the scattering of residents milling around. Agnes nodded curtly, taking her usual seat in the front row. "I have several items to bring to the board's attention, Harold." Harold's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, Agnes, we always appreciate your thoroughness." The meeting commenced with the usual droning reports on landscaping budgets and community event planning. Agnes listened with simmering impatience, waiting for her turn. Finally, Harold opened the floor for community concerns. Agnes rose to her feet, her voice resonating with practiced authority. "I'd like to address several ongoing violations of the HOA bylaws." She gestured to her notes. First, the recurring issue of unkempt lawns. The Millers at number 14, specifically, have failed to maintain adequate edging along their walkway. A few disgruntled murmurs rippled through the room. Harold sighed internally. He'd known this was coming. "Thank you, Agnes. Will send them a reminder." Agnes continued, undeterred. "Furthermore, I've observed instances of improper garbage disposal. Several residents are placing their bins out before the designated time, attracting vermin and creating an unsightly mess." She scanned the room, her gaze landing pointedly on Mr. Henderson, who always seemed to forget the garbage schedule. Mr. Henderson coughed nervously. "We'll reiterate the garbage collection guidelines," Harold offered, attempting to placate both Agnes and the increasingly restless audience. Agnes paused for effect, then delivered her final, most potent grievance. "And finally, I must express my grave concerns regarding the unauthorized construction and operation of an unapproved structure at number 22. I have personally witnessed the presence of what appears to be unlicensed machinery within this structure. This poses a potential safety hazard and a clear violation of our community standards." A murmur of surprise filled the room. Agnes felt a surge of satisfaction. She had their attention now. Harold ran a hand through his thinning hair. Number 22, the Abernathy property? I wasn't aware of any shed. It's there, Harold. I assure you. And it's emitting concerning noises. I suggest we investigate immediately, before it affects our property values. Agnes stared pointedly at Harold. The HOA needed to act. This wasn't just about rules, it was about upholding the integrity of Willow Creek Estates. A single stray leaf, left unchecked, could lead to a whole avalanche of infractions, and Agnes Plumtree was not about to let that happen. The enigma of the shed. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Sycamore Lane as Arthur Penhaligon's battered pickup truck rumbled into his driveway. Agnes Plumtree, perched behind her lace curtains, paused her meticulous pruning of her prize-winning roses. Arthur was a quiet one, kept to himself mostly, never a bother, but today was different. He wrestled an enormous, unmarked cardboard box from the truck. It was almost as tall as he was, its sides bulging ominously. Agnes's brow furrowed. What on earth could that be? Arthur, usually so deliberate, seemed to struggle, grunting softly as he maneuvered the unwieldy package towards the shed in his backyard. Agnes released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The shed, that rickety, paint-peeling eyesore, had been on her list for months. A blatant violation of Section 3, Subsection C, Paragraph 2 of the HOA Guidelines regarding property maintenance and aesthetic uniformity. But Arthur always seemed so harmless. She hadn't had the heart to issue a formal complaint yet. Later that evening, Agnes found herself unable to sleep. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed a mournful midnight. As she tossed and turned, a peculiar whirring sound drifted in through her open window. It was rhythmic, almost like a sewing machine, but deeper, more mechanical. Intrigued and slightly irritated, Agnes crept to the window. The sound was definitely coming from Arthur's shed. A faint light flickered from beneath the door. Agnes pressed her ear against the cool glass. The whirring continued, punctuated by occasional clicks and what sounded like the low hum of an electric motor. She strained to decipher the activity. Was he sawing something? Grinding? Illegal construction was strictly forbidden after 10 p.m. This was getting serious. The next few days, Agnes found herself increasingly preoccupied with Arthur's shed. She subtly altered her gardening schedule to coincide with his comings and goings. She observed him entering the shed multiple times a day, carrying an odd assortment of items, rolls of what looked like brightly colored plastic filament, small electronic components, and once a half-disassembled bicycle wheel. He never greeted her, just offered a quick, almost apologetic nod before disappearing inside. She saw him emerge, too, carrying equally baffling things. A tangle of wires, what appeared to be a molded plastic casing vaguely resembling a knee brace. She even spotted him carefully carrying out a box of what looked like specialized tools. She couldn't quite identify, they were like nothing she'd ever seen in her husband Edgar's garage. The more she watched, the more perplexed she became. The whirring sounds at night continued, sometimes lasting for hours. Agnes began to feel a sense of unease that went beyond mere HOA violations. There was something secretive, almost clandestine, about Arthur's activities. The shed, once just an eyesore, was now an enigma. She imagined all sorts of illicit possibilities. Had Arthur taken up a hobby, or was something more sinister going on behind those weathered walls? Agnes considered calling the authorities, but something held her back. Arthur was a quiet man, a neighbor. She couldn't accuse him of anything without proof, but this couldn't continue. She needed answers. The integrity of Sycamore Lane, and perhaps even the safety of the neighborhood, might depend on it. She made a decision. She would confront Arthur. She would demand to know what was going on inside that shed. Whispers and warnings. Agnes inhaled sharply, her clammy hand welded to the phone. The decibel app throbbed, frantic crimson bars spiking and receding with each muffled impact from Arthur Penhaligon's shed. 62 decibels, then 70. Intolerable. Willow Creek Estates was quite clear, a 55 decibel ceiling after 8 p.m. It was pushing 10. Outrageous din, she huffed, saving the measurement to her growing archive of offenses. The project had started a week prior, a low hum of suspicion escalating into full-blown certainty. Arthur wasn't merely puttering around in there. He was producing something, and production meant commerce. Unapproved commerce. On residential grounds. The nerve. Agnes consulted the handwritten log on her clipboard. September 14th. 7:15 p.m., unmarked van, shaded windows, delivered 3 substantial, anonymous cartons. 9/15. 11:47 p.m., Arthur spotted hauling what appeared to be metal struts into the shed. 9/16. Persistent hammering. 9/17. This infernal racket. She was constructing a case, one painstaking entry at a time. The scent of evergreens permeated the tranquil night air. A solitary cricket trilled, an impudent solo against the shed's percussive rhythm. A surge of self-righteous indignation coursed through Agnes. Someone had to safeguard the serenity of Willow Creek Estates. Someone had to enforce the bylaws. The following morning, armed with her clipboard and a calming cup of chamomile tea, Agnes intercepted Martha Higgins near the mail kiosks. Martha, perpetually wide-eyed and draped in floral prints, served as an ideal sounding board. And Agnes conceded privately, a reliable conduit for neighborhood scuttlebutt. Martha, darling, Agnes began, adopting a low, conspiratorial tone. Have you observed anything peculiar about Arthur Penhaligon lately? Martha blinked, her brow furrowed. Peculiar? He seems pleasant enough. Always offers a wave when he drives by. Agnes scoffed, a refined sound that barely disturbed her immaculate hairstyle. A wave is hardly the issue. Martha, it's what he's concealing behind those shed walls. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I've been monitoring the situation. Late-night deliveries. Odd acoustics. I even detected what I suspect was the faint aroma of solvents. Martha's eyes ballooned. Solvents? Agnes, do you imagine he's manufacturing narcotics? Agnes hadn't envisioned narcotics. Illegal pyrotechnics, perhaps. Bootleg designer bags? But illicit drugs. That was a new, and frankly, terrifying prospect. She straightened her back, basking in Martha's horrified reaction. I couldn't possibly say for sure, Martha, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. What I do know is that clandestine operations are underway, and it's our obligation as conscientious members of this community to delve deeper. But Agnes? Martha stammered, clutching her mail as if for dear life. What if he's dangerous? What if he possesses a firearm? Agnes flicked her wrist dismissively. Nonsense. I highly doubt he owns a firearm. But even if he did, we cannot allow fear to cripple us. This is about protecting our property values, Martha. Think of the children. She motioned vaguely towards the nearby playground, where a couple of toddlers were engrossed in sandbox excavation. We cannot permit a potential clandestine laboratory to flourish so proximate to innocent young lives. Martha's face now reflected genuine panic. What action should we take? Agnes? Contact law enforcement. Agnes tapped her clipboard, feigning contemplation. Not as yet. We require more tangible evidence. Undeniable proof. A verifiable record. But in the interim, remain vigilant, Martha. Document any irregularities you witness or detect, and for heaven's sake, ensure your doors are locked. As Martha hurried away, her mail clutched like a talisman, Agnes permitted herself a subtle, self-approving smile. The rumors had taken root. The warnings were disseminated, and presently, Arthur Penhaligon's covert activities would be exposed. She simply required a bit more information, the confrontation. Agnes strode across the manicured expanse separating her land from Arthur Penhaligon's. The air, thick enough to swim in, reeked of freshly mown grass, a smell she usually cherished, but today, it was a pointed jab, a reminder of the prim, proper veneer of Willow Creek Estates, a veneer Arthur seemed intent on tearing down. Her purse, gripped tight, bit into her palm. Arthur labored in his yard, engrossed in something inside his shed. The structure, a drab, functional box, had always appeared, incongruous amidst the neighborhood's pastel uniformity. The steady, muffled pounding emanating from within had frayed her nerves for weeks, a persistent, low-pitched drone that vibrated through her floors and set her china rattling. She halted at the edge of his property, the boundary clearly defined by a line of precisely sculpted rose bushes, a border she intended to breach both physically and figuratively. "Arthur," she called, her voice edgier than she'd intended. He jolted, appearing in the shed doorway, wiping his hands on a soiled rag. He was a man whose age was hard to pin down. His face a map of lines earned from sun or worry, She couldn't decide which. "Agnes," he replied, his tone even. "What can I do for you?" "I believe that's my question, Arthur. This incessant noise, for weeks now, emanating from your shed, and the deliveries, at all hours, unmarked containers, substantial in size. It disturbs the peace, Arthur, and frankly, it smacks of clandestine activity." She rooted herself to the spot, the weight of her accusations anchoring her. Arthur sighed. The sound like air hissing from a punctured tire. He discarded the rag onto a workbench visible inside the shed, revealing a chaotic arrangement of wires, tools, and nascent constructions. "It's just a pastime, Agnes. A private endeavor." "A pastime? Conducted around the clock? Fed by deliveries of industrial proportions? What sort of hobby demands such covert operations?" Agnes sniffed, her nose wrinkling. She detected a faint, astringent odor mingling with the smell of grease, something metallic and faintly chemical. Arthur's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. He raked a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, Agnes, I appreciate your concern, but I assure you, I'm not in violation of any HOA covenants. I've made certain that I'm working within the prescribed limitations." "Made certain with whom?" "Because I spoke to Mrs. Henderson only yesterday, and she has received no notifications concerning special projects or waivers regarding noise pollution." Agnes knew she sounded censorious, but she couldn't bridle herself. The man was clearly prevaricating. "Mrs. Henderson. Well, she's rather preoccupied, I imagine. Perhaps there was a lapse in communication." He averted his eyes, focusing instead on a clump of weeds stubbornly sprouting between the paving stones. "It's intricate, difficult to articulate." "Intricate? What complication is there in whittling wood? Or sculpting clay? Or whatever innocuous little pursuit you're trying to misrepresent as this industrial undertaking?" Agnes gestured toward the shed, her voice gaining volume. Arthur's jaw hardened. "It's not woodworking, Agnes, and it's not your affair." He finally met her gaze, and for the first time, Agnes glimpsed something beyond mildness. A glint of defiance, perhaps even anger. "Not my affair. When it's shattering the serenity of my residence. When it poses a potential threat to my property values. Everything that transpires in this enclave is my affair, Arthur." Agnes felt heat climb her neck. Arthur drew a long breath. "Agnes, I cannot divulge the precise nature of my work. Not yet. But I vouch that it's nothing illicit, nothing that contravenes the HOA guidelines, and the result will be worthwhile. Simply have faith in me." "Have faith in you?" Agnes scoffed. "You've afforded me absolutely no cause for trust. On the contrary, you've furnished me with every reason to surmise you're deliberately concealing something, and I intend to unearth it." She pivoted sharply, her purse smacking against her hip. "Consider this a formal warning, Arthur. I'll be keeping a close watch." As she marched back across the lawn, the steady thump from the shed amplified, a mocking rhythm accompanying her simmering ire. The scent of grease and chemicals clung to the air, a palpable testament to Arthur's evasiveness and Agnes's growing conviction that some deep impropriety was unfolding behind that bland, gray facade. Escalation. Agnes attacked the keyboard, each tap a miniature declaration of war against Arthur Penhaligon's maddening serenity. The digital document swelled, a monument to her unflagging civic duty. Formal complaint regarding activities at 14 Willow Creek Lane. She'd initiated contact with a cordial note, hadn't she? A gesture of neighborly solicitude, but Arthur's reticence, that guarded, almost furtive demeanor, had forced her hand toward a more forceful approach. A tirade of righteous indignation now poured from her. The preposterous hours of operation, the ceaseless drone and rasp emanating from the shed, often stretching beyond the civilized hour of 10. The furtive entrances and exits of certain individuals, she left their description vague, hinting only at their shifty glances and aversion to direct contact. Let the HOA's anxieties paint the picture. Then there was the question of the machinery. Agnes wasn't born yesterday. Years of experience had attuned her ear to the telltale rumble of industrial-grade equipment, however muffled by makeshift walls. Whatever Arthur was fabricating back there, It unquestionably surpassed permissible decibel levels and risked infringing on zoning ordinances. Unlicensed machinery, she typed, setting the words in italics for added gravitas. It carried a more authoritative ring that way. She concluded with a firm call for immediate remediation. Failure to rectify these infractions, she warned, would leave her with no recourse but to consult legal professionals. Agnes leaned back. A knot of tension in her neck. It was a masterpiece of polite yet pointed disapproval. She printed 3 copies. One for Harold Finch, another for the HOA secretary, and a third, of course, for her own meticulously maintained archives. The HOA meeting hummed with the familiar chorus of grievances about untrimmed shrubs and misplaced refuse containers. Agnes, spine rigid, clutched her carefully curated dossiers. Harold Finch, a man perpetually teetering on the edge of panic, opened the floor to new matters. She seized the opportunity. "I have a pressing concern," she announced, her voice imbued with a gravity that prompted several heads to swivel in her direction. Harold visibly blanched. "Yes, Agnes?" he mumbled, nervously adjusting his spectacles. Agnes launched her presentation, consulting her diligently prepared notes. She recounted the incessant noises, the late hours, the suspicious figures. She even brandished a decibel reading she'd captured from her patio, irrefutable proof of the excessive racket. That a wave of discomfort rippled through the assembled residents. "And what, specifically, do you propose, Agnes?" Harold inquired, struggling to regain control of the proceedings. "I propose," Agnes declared, her voice gaining altitude, "that the HOA conduct a thorough investigation into Mr. Penhaligon's activities and rigorously enforce community bylaws concerning noise pollution, zoning violations, and unauthorized commercial enterprises." She punctuated her demand by slamming her file onto the table, the sound echoing through the room. A ripple of whispers spread through the gathering. Old Mrs. Henderson, a professional complainer, offered a supportive nod. Mr. Peterson, whose hound barked at every passing leaf, appeared distinctly uneasy. Harold sighed inwardly. He knew Arthur, a quiet, self-contained individual. This felt overblown. But Agnes was an immovable force, and she had threatened legal action. "Agnes," Harold began, massaging his temples in a futile attempt to ward off the inevitable headache. "We understand your worries. The HOA will delve into this matter." "Delve into it?" Agnes scoffed, her voice laced with skepticism. "I expect more than a cursory examination. I demand action. I expect that man to be held accountable for his disruptive and potentially unlawful conduct." Harold felt a rivulet of perspiration trace a path down his temple. We will dispatch a cautionary letter to Mr. Penhaligon," he stammered, groping for a diplomatic solution. "We'll ask him to elucidate his activities." Agnes scrutinized him, her eyes narrowed to slits. "A mere warning letter? Is that the extent of your resolve, Harold?" "It's a starting point, Agnes," Harold pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. "It's the most we can do at this juncture. We must adhere to protocol." Agnes, though far from satisfied, reluctantly conceded. "Very well. But I expect a comprehensive report on the investigation. And I expect this situation to be resolved without undue delay." She gathered her ammunition and made a dramatic exit, leaving Harold Finch to mop his brow and silently lament the day he'd accepted the thankless role of HOA president. The burden of Willow Creek Lane, and particularly Agnes Plumtree, weighed heavier than ever. He had a letter to compose, and he dreaded the confrontation he knew awaited him with Arthur Penhaligon. That he could already feel the ominous throb of an impending migraine. The warning shot. The envelope, thick and cream-laid, felt weighty in Arthur Penhaligon's hand. He set aside his coffee, a frown etching itself onto his face as he registered the Willow Creek Homeowners Association's embossed emblem. Junk mail never possessed this kind of authority. This paper stock that seemed to augur trouble. The knot tightened in his gut as he tore it open. The letter was clipped. Official.it cited infractions of sections 3.2 b, excessive noise, 4.1a, unapproved structural alterations, and 6.5, unregistered machinery use. The final sentence, stark in bold typeface and underlined, gave him 14 days to remedy the situation or face legal repercussions. Arthur scanned it once more, his jaw muscles flexing. Excessive noise? Unapproved alterations? Unregistered machinery? He raked a hand through his already unruly hair. IT had to be about the outbuilding. But who complained? He located Harold Finch's contact information on the HOA website and placed the call. Finch answered on the third ring, his tone strained. Penhaligon? What's this about? Harold, it's Arthur. I just got a notice from the HOA, and I'm completely in the dark. What excessive noise could they possibly mean? Finch exhaled, the sound heavy with resignation. Look, Arthur, Agnes Plumtree lodged a complaint. She claimed she heard unusual sounds emanating from your property at all hours, a sort of grinding, a whirring. That's the 3D printers, Arthur clarified, a note of exasperation creeping into his voice. I thought I was keeping a low profile. I always keep the shed doors shut. And the alterations? Finch pressed, reciting from a document. I installed a small ventilation system in the shed. It's vital for dispersing the resin fumes. It's hardly an eyesore. Harold, it's just a metal pipe. Finch cleared his throat nervously. Agnes also reported machinery. Unregistered machinery, she specified. Unregistered? Harold, they're 3D printers. They simply plug into the wall. I'm not running a uranium enrichment plant here, Arthur sputtered, his voice climbing in pitch. Arthur, I'm simply delivering the message, Finch said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. Agnes is rather tenacious. You'll need to attend the next HOA meeting. Explain your endeavor. The meeting unfolded within the Willow Creek Community Center, a room usually echoing with bingo calls and potluck chatter, now infused with an air of tense expectation. Arthur, self-conscious in his resin-dusted work attire, stood out amidst the meticulously groomed residents. Agnes Plumtree occupied a front-row seat, arms rigidly crossed, her expression a study in disapproval. Harold Finch, looking utterly beleaguered, rapped a gavel against the table to commence the proceedings. All right. Everyone, let's begin. First item on the agenda, a grievance submitted by Mrs. Plumtree concerning activities occurring on Mr. Penhaligon's land. He directed a weary gesture towards Arthur. Mr. Penhaligon, would you care to elaborate? Arthur advanced, clutching a box showcasing the fruits of his labor. Thank you, Mr. Finch. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand concerns have been voiced regarding the operations within my shed. I assure you, I am not operating an illicit dismantling service, nor am I engaging in any activity that diminishes property values. He opened the box, displaying a prosthetic hand, its surface polished and fingers fully articulated. I employ 3D printers to fabricate these. They are prosthetic limbs for veterans wounded in combat. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembly. Agnes Plumtree remained impassive, her gaze laser-focused on Arthur. These printers empower me to produce bespoke prosthetics at a significantly reduced cost compared to conventional methods, Arthur continued. His confidence growing. He presented a brightly hued prosthetic leg designed for a child. This particular one is intended for a young girl who lost her leg in an accident. Her insurance would not cover the premium model. He circulated the prosthetics, inviting inspection. Most residents appeared impressed, even humbled. All except Agnes. That's all well and good, Mr. Penhaligon, she declared, her voice laced with steel. However, it fails to address the persistent noise. Or the alterations to your property. Or the unregistered machinery. What if an accident occurs? Who carries the responsibility? Responsibility? Arthur echoed, incredulous. I maintain comprehensive liability coverage. I'm offering a vital service to individuals in dire need. Harold Finch rubbed his temples wearily. Agnes does raise a valid point, Arthur. What sort of safety accreditations do these things possess? Safety accreditations? Arthur repeated, his voice devoid of inflection. They are conceived in collaboration with doctors and physical therapists. They are not frivolous toys. They are medical devices, albeit experimental in nature, and I'm not selling them. They are donations. Regardless, Agnes countered, her voice escalating, you are running a commercial enterprise without the appropriate approvals, and frankly, Mr. Penhaligon, I find the entire scenario rather suspect. Finch sighed, the sound heavy with weariness. All right, let's not jump to conclusions. We require further investigation. We must consult the HOA's legal counsel, assess potential liabilities. A wave of despair engulfed Arthur. He had attempted to explain, to reason, but they remained resistant. They perceived only potential liabilities, potential litigation. He gathered his prosthetics, repacking them into the box. Fine, he stated, his voice tight with restrained anger. Consult your legal counsel. Assess your liabilities. I'll be in my shed, assisting those in need. If that constitutes a problem, then initiate legal proceedings. He turned and exited the community center, leaving behind a room full of bewildered expressions and one radiating satisfaction. Social media storm. Agnes chewed the inside of her cheek, the sour tang of anxiety, a familiar companion these days. The HOA warning letter, printed on thick, cream-colored paper, lay beside her laptop, a silent sentinel guarding her resolve. She reread it for the 10th time, focusing on the phrase potential violation of residential zoning ordinances. Potential, that was the KEY.IT gave her leverage. She opened the neighborhood Facebook group, Willow Creek Connect, and stared at the blank text box. It had to be perfect, measured, impartial, but undeniably damning. She typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, after an hour of agonizing, she settled on a post. Good morning, neighbors. I'm writing with a concern that I believe affects us all. As many of you know, Mr. Penhaligon on Elm Street operates a workshop in his detached garage. While I admire entrepreneurship, I've noticed an increase in late-night activity, bright lights, unusual sounds, and deliveries of what appear to be industrial materials. I'm simply asking, has anyone else observed this, and does anyone know if Mr. Penhaligon has the necessary permits to operate what seems to be a business within our residential zone? We all value the peace and quiet of Willow Creek, and it's important to ensure that all activities are compliant with our HOA regulations. Agnes hit post and immediately felt a rush of adrenaline, followed by a wave of guilt. She shoved it down. This was for the good of the community. She deserved to live in a neighborhood free from the incessant whirring and clanging emanating from Arthur's property. Within minutes, the comments started trickling in. Now that you mention it, Agnes, I did hear something last night around 11. Sounded like a jackhammer. Brenda F. Industrial materials? I saw a truck unloading something covered with a tarp a few weeks ago. Thought it was a hot tub? Marcus? Agnes felt a vindictive thrill course through her. She responded to each comment, carefully fueling the flames of suspicion. Yes, Brenda. The noise is often quite disruptive. Mark, I believe the deliveries are more frequent than we realize. Perhaps someone could contact the HOA and inquire about permits? The momentum built. More neighbors chimed in, their concerns echoing Agnes's. Whispers of unlicensed activity and potential safety hazard began to circulate. Agnes, emboldened, subtly steered the conversation towards the mysterious nature of Arthur's work. Has anyone actually seen what he's making in there? She wrote, adding a concerned face emoji for good measure. The responses grew more speculative, more accusatory. Some suggested Arthur was running a chop shop. Others speculated about illegal manufacturing. One particularly imaginative neighbor even hinted at a meth lab. Meanwhile, Arthur was at the grocery store, wrestling with a cart whose front wheel had a mind of its own. He grabbed a loaf of rye bread and some sliced ham, thinking of the sandwiches he'd make for himself and Sergeant Miller when the vet came by to pick up his newly fitted prosthetic. As he turned to go to the checkout, he overheard two women whispering, their eyes darting in his direction. Something about loud noises and trucks, one murmured. Always seemed a bit odd, didn't he? The other replied, shaking her head. Arthur's stomach clenched. He paid for his groceries and hurried home, a knot of apprehension tightening in his chest. The next day, Arthur walked out to get his mail. Mrs. Henderson, who usually greeted him with a cheerful wave and a request for zucchini bread, crossed the street to avoid him. He saw her clutching her purse tightly. Her lips pursed in a tight line. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He retreated inside, the weight of the ostracism heavy on his shoulders. He scrolled through Willow Creek Connect, and the reality of Agnes's campaign hit him like a punch to the gut. The accusations, the insinuations, the outright lies, they were all there, laid bare for the entire neighborhood to see. His heart sank. He had been so focused on his work, on helping those who needed it, that he hadn't noticed the storm brewing around him, that he hadn't seen Agnes, with her carefully crafted words, turning his neighbors against him. The truth unveiled. Brenda Chan adjusted her microphone, the fuzzy windscreen doing little to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. Willow Creek Estates IT looked every bit as manicured and homogeneous as the complaints she'd read. Identical beige houses lined the streets like obedient soldiers, each lawn a perfect, unsettling shade of green. She found Agnes Plumtree's house easily enough. The perfectly symmetrical rose bushes were a dead giveaway. Agnes, a woman whose face seemed permanently set in a scowl, greeted Brenda at the door. "So, you're here about the situation?" It wasn't a question. "Yes, Miss Plumtree. I'm Brenda Chan. With Channel 7 News. I understand there's a dispute regarding Mr. Penhaligon's workshop." Agnes ushered her inside, the scent of potpourri thick in the air. "Dispute? It's a blatant violation of HOA regulations. Unlicensed machinery, constant noise. It's disrupting the entire neighborhood." She gestured emphatically with a hand adorned with chunky rings. "And the type of people it attracts." Brenda raised an eyebrow, scribbling in her notepad. "The type of people?" Agnes huffed. "Strangers, coming and going at all hours. It's unsettling. It disrupts the peace." Brenda thanked Agnes for her time, the interview leaving a bad taste in her mouth. It smelled of suspicion and, dare she say, a pinch of prejudice. She navigated the labyrinthine streets to Arthur Penhaligon's house. His lawn was less manicured, more lived in. A child's bicycle lay abandoned near a basketball hoop. Arthur answered the door, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. He seemed genuinely surprised by her visit. "Brenda Chan? From Channel 7? What can I do for you?" Brenda explained her reason for being there, and Arthur's expression shifted from surprise to resignation. He sighed. "I figured this would happen eventually. Come on in." The workshop was a revelation, not the chaotic, greasy space Brenda had envisioned, but a clean, organized area filled with the hum of 3D printers. Partially assembled prosthetic limbs lay on workbenches, each one meticulously crafted. Arthur showed her the process, explaining the intricate software, the careful calibration, the sheer artistry involved. "These aren't just machines, Ms. Chen," he said, his voice filled with passion. "They're giving people their lives back." Brenda felt a lump forming in her throat. "Who are you making these for?" "Mostly veterans," Arthur replied, picking up a sleek, carbon fiber leg, "guys who've lost limbs in combat. The VA can be slow, and they're personalized, custom-fit. A real difference maker." He then led her to the small living room where a man with an empty pant leg was sitting. Arthur made the introductions. "Brenda, this is Mac Allen. Mac, this is Brenda Chun from Channel 7. Mac, a man whose eyes held a story of pain and resilience, offered a warm smile. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." Brenda sat down, her reporter's instincts kicking in. "Mac, would you mind telling me a little about your story?" Mac leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant for a moment. "I lost my leg in Afghanistan, stepped on an IED. The VA gave me a prosthetic, but it never really fit right, caused me a lot of pain." He paused, looking at Arthur with gratitude. "Then I met Arthur. He built me this." He tapped the sleek prosthetic he was wearing. "It's changed my life. I can walk without pain. I can play with my grandkids. I can be a normal person again." Brenda listened, her heart aching. She saw the frustration in Agnes Plumtree's eyes, but now she also saw the hope in Mac Allen's. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was a story of compassion, innovation, and the quiet heroism of everyday people. As she left Arthur's house, Brenda knew she had a story. A story that needed to be told, loud and clear, and she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones, that this was just the beginning. Redemption. The broadcast sucker punched Agnes. Brenda Chin, her face a beacon of sincerity and her tone dripping with indignation, stood before Arthur's workshop, now a local landmark. "Arthur Penhaligon," Brenda announced, the sound vibrating from Agnes's own screen, "is facing legal threats for aiding those who've borne the ultimate cost for our nation." The segment was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. It juxtaposed close-ups of Arthur's caring hands crafting a prosthetic with footage of grateful veterans testing out their new limbs. Then came the carefully curated sound bites of Agnes. Her expression pinched, her voice strident as she decried unsightly contraptions and breaches of tranquility. It was a grotesque distortion, a funhouse mirror reflection of the woman she believed herself to be. The backlash detonated almost immediately. Her phone became a vibrating viper, each alert a fresh jab. Emails deluged her inbox. A toxic flood of hate mail eclipsing the usual HOA drivel. Facebook was a war zone. Her earlier post, where she'd smugly declared her intention to restore decorum to Willow Creek Estates, was now a public execution. The comments branded her a callous ghoul, a leech preying on a local hero. Someone had even memified her, Agnes's face plastered onto the Wicked Witch of the West, with the caption, "I'll get you, my pretty dot, and your little workshop, too." Agnes collapsed into her plush armchair, its familiar embrace now offering no comfort. The images, the furious words, the sheer venom churned within her, a suffocating undertow. Each comment she reread was another shovelful of dirt on her already crumbling sense of self. How could you be so heartless? Shame on you, Agnes Plumtree. You're a disgrace to this community. Her husband, Gerald, entered, his brow furrowed with concern. Agnes, what on earth have you done? He rumbled, holding up his phone to display a particularly vicious tweet. The entire internet is seeing this. Agnes longed to defend herself, to articulate her initial worries about the clamor, the lost sleep, the specter of plummeting property values, but the justifications caught in her throat, turning to ash. Seeing the disappointment etched on Gerald's face, an unfamiliar stab of shame pierced through her. Sleep proved elusive that night. She writhed in bed, haunted by Arthur's hopeful gaze and the veteran's grateful smiles, the faces of her own father, a decorated soldier who'd stoically endured his inner demons, the faces of childhood friends who had paid the ultimate price. Finally, at 3 a.m., she was drawn back to her computer like a moth to a flame. She stared at the blank screen, her fingers trembling above the keyboard. She needed to do something, anything, to staunch this bleeding. She typed, backspaced, rewrote, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. Eventually, after an eternity, she posted a message on the Willow Creek Estates community page. The following morning, Agnes drove to Arthur's workshop, her grip tight on the steering wheel. Harold Finch, looking more beleaguered than ever, blocked her path at the gate. "Agnes, I really don't think this is a good time." "Harold, please," she implored. "I need to speak with Arthur." Arthur emerged, his expression weary but resolute. Agnes inhaled deeply. "Arthur?" she began, her voice unsteady. "I owe you an apology, a monumental one. I was wrong. Utterly wrong. Your work is extraordinary, a true blessing to these veterans. To us all, I am profoundly sorry for the disruption I caused." She fumbled for a check in her purse, her hand shaking so violently that Harold steadied it. "This is for your project," she stammered. "It's not much, but I hope it helps." Arthur glanced at the check, then back at Agnes, his face inscrutable. Then, a slow smile blossomed across his face. "Thank you, Agnes. That means the world." Agnes didn't stop there. She dedicated her time, channeling her, previously misdirected, organizational talents to manage the flood of donations and volunteers. She spearheaded a fundraising gala, leveraging her social network to garner even greater support. The community united behind Arthur and Agnes. Contributions poured in from every corner of the nation, exceeding all expectations. Local businesses provided materials, and volunteers clamored to assist with every aspect, from 3D printing to prosthetic assembly. Agnes found herself alongside Arthur, learning about the intricate process of limb creation. She witnessed the veterans' joy as they reclaimed their mobility. Their autonomy at IT was a profound experience that eroded the layers of bitterness and anxiety that had petrified her heart. The capricious news cycle moved on. Brenda Chun returned to Willow Creek Estates, this time to document the overwhelming community support for Arthur's work and Agnes's remarkable turnaround. The segment closed with Agnes, her features softened, her eyes brimming with authentic emotion, assisting a young veteran as he practiced walking with his new prosthetic. "It's about more than just crafting limbs," Agnes told Brenda Chun, her voice firm and clear. "It's about giving people back their lives."